Hey friends, thanks for joining us on the EquippingU podcast. Our prayer is that this podcast will encourage and equip Alliance pastors and leaders to live spiritually healthy lives and lead healthy churches. For more information about the Christ-centered Acts 1-8 Alliance family, visit EquippingU.org.
Hey, welcome back to EquippingU Podcast. This is Season 11, Episode 9. We're recording this in the middle of the baseball spring training season, so we'll call today's episode a split squad game.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Yes. So Alan is in...
Talking my language.
Middletown, Pennsylvania. Windy Middletown, Pennsylvania.
It is.
And Isaac, our producer, is in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. But I'm in Maricopa, Arizona.
Totally jealous.
Yes, you should be. Home of the Auction Native American community. The city of Maricopa, south of Phoenix, has grown from just a little over 1,000 back 24 years ago to now almost 80,000 people living here. And I'm here in Maricopa because Pastor John Smith, lead pastor at Maricopa Alliance Church, invited us to record remotely. And hey, it's March and I get to go to Arizona. So I said, yes, I'll be happy to.
Oh, man.
So got to preach in John's church yesterday and met with some Arizona pastors and just a great weekend. So John is serving as our producer today in his home-based recording studio that will
way to go, John.
Look just like we're back in the video room in Reynoldsburg. So I'm Terry, Church Ministries Leader for the Alliance.
And I'm Alan, Director of Development, Eastern PA Alliance, and jealous of Terry today.
Generally a true statement, Alan.
I almost left him speechless. It was so close.
So close. So today we're going to be talking to Michael Gilmore, who is the South Pacific Alliance Director for Next Gen Ministry and also communications. But today we're focusing in on Next Gen Ministry. So, Alan, you began your ministry as a youth minister.
Sure
Has
did.
much changed from then until now?
How about has anything not changed from then until now? It might be a better question.
I think that's the
although
truth.
the hearts of teenagers still are longing for real connection, but the law on the surface has changed for sure.
There you go. Alan began youth ministry back in 1964,
Stop
I believe.
Don't make me older than I am, for Pete's sake. You're the only boomer on this podcast.
So, truthfully, Next Gen Ministry is more complex than ever. So we're going to look forward to some insights from Michael. So grab yourself a house brew from Honeycut Coffee in Maricopa, Arizona, where they say coffee and friends make a perfect blend. Sit back, relax. Here we go. And we are pleased to welcome Michael Gilmore to EquippingU Podcast.
Good morning for us, I guess, here on the West Coast.
Good day. Let's do it that way. Good day. Good day, mate.
Good day.
Yes. So, Michael, we like to let our listeners get to know a little bit about the folks that we're interviewing. Not a lot, just a little bit.
Sure.
So, tell us how you came to know Jesus, how you met Sadie, and how y'all came to be an Alliance ministry.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't want to dox myself, you're saying, so not too much information.
Just tell us the good stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, where do I even begin? I guess I'll actually start backwards, and because both sides of my grandparents were Alliance people.
Wow.
So like I have a family history of Alliance. I bleed Alliance red. And so it's been in my life. My father's been an Alliance pastor, was Alliance pastor for over 30 years. And now leads our district out here. But for me, like we started in Texas. I was born in Fort Worth and church out there until we moved to Wisconsin when I was 4 to 11 in Wisconsin, where I became a Packer fan that I am. And Nebraska,
not a bad thing.
11 to throughout college. And then after I graduated from Crown, moved to California with my parents, who had just moved out here for free food and rent, like any good college graduate would do. I started feeling a call to ministry in junior high. And I loved my youth ministry. I loved my youth pastors. And my small group leader would always say, well, my youth pastor would say, you guys are the leaders of the church tomorrow. And my small group leader would say, they're the leaders of the church today. Yeah. And that inspired me, that encouraged me.
Yes.
And so I started to walk down this path of pursuing youth ministry in high school, ended up at Crown College in Minnesota. And at my time at Crown, I wrestled with that call and if I wanted to be a professional Christian still.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to California, I was a college graduate with nothing going on and no plans. And so the elders of my dad's church were just like, well, you paid a lot of money to be able to do this. Why don't you come work for us for very little money and just take care of our kids for now? And started part-time and fell back in love with ministry and youth ministry in 2012. My wife was at that church. So her and her family had been attending Northgate Community Church in Cathedral City for almost 10 years when we came out there. And so we met there. Her parents were on the worship team and heavily involved in the church. And she was going to school at University of Riverside and University of California in Riverside. And the rest is kind of history there. So I was at that church for almost 10 years. Until Bill Malik, I started working with Bill Malik at the South Pacific District Office, doing some videos for him, recording trainings or interviewing some of his church planning people. And then also I worked part-time under Bill as the youth ministry coordinator and organizing the youth winter camp and the training events. And then as things shifted in the past few years, Gina Edmond expanded that role for me and brought me on full time to not just do youth, but kids and communication and our emails and expand that video ministry of our district. And so it's been a really awesome opportunity and journey. But the Alliance has just been in my life forever. And so as long as I can remember.
Fantastic.
Well, then we always love to ask the one of our favorite questions, which is, who are 2 or 3 leaders who have been most influential on your life and ministry? I think we can maybe guess one of those, but there's probably some that we have no idea who they are.
Absolutely. I don't know if I can limit it to 2 or 3. In growing up in high school, those youth pastors, Brian Abbott, my small group leader, Scott Holmes, were huge. Kevin Pringle was my high school youth pastor and gave me opportunities to teach the youth group and lessons in high school. That was a huge impact for me to have those small opportunities. At college, some of my bosses, Sarah Gurley, Matt Cordis, Bill Kuhn, Ken Castor, Gary Wozniak was in that. Were all very influential to me in those years of learning what it means to be youth pastor, what it means to have effective ministry. Obviously, yes, my father is one of those influential people in my life, and he's been my pastor for over 30 years. And so definitely big, and working alongside him at Northgate was very influential. Outside of some of those personal mentors, Josh Griffin and Doug Fields, who run Download Youth Ministry, they came out of Saddleback, but they're awesome, and I love their hearts for ministry and what they're doing. Mark Ostreicher is another person. I first was introduced to him at Crown, reading some of his books, and have recently gotten to know him. He lives in San Diego, and have been able to get to know him in the past few years. And then the last one that I do want to give a shout out to that has influenced me is Pete Scazzaro in his Emotionally Healthy Discipleship series. And I love that on a personal level, but I've taken students through emotionally healthy relationships, emotionally healthy spirituality, and it's powerful for them. And I think they are working on developing an emotionally healthy course for youth too. So I'm looking forward to continuing to see that happen.
Great. Love it. Love the fact that there are always names that we've never heard of.
Yes, absolutely.
Are kind of maybe behind the scenes folks, but influential, whether or not they even realized it. Influential.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Michael, describe your ministry role in the district and particularly your role that involves Next Gen.
Yeah. So our district used to have just two kind of part-time stipend people, one to kind of be available for children's ministry and one to be available for youth ministry. And when things shifted after COVID and new elections, we said, well, let's make that one role and we can make that more prominent. And so that's why we created this Next Gen director. Mm-hmm. And so my role includes caring for our youth and children's workers throughout the district. Two main ways that I do that are our winter camp. So we do a kids camp for 4th through 6th grade and a 6th through 12th grade camp right now. And we're building that back up after COVID, and a training event, a one-day training event. And we've been partnering with the national office for Next Ministry Conference for a few years now. And that's been really great to work alongside Leah and Scott and Charles and everything they're doing with Next Ministry Conference. But my role, I view it more as, all ministry is about relationship and being in relationship. Mm-hmm. And I view my role as more than anything being available for people, because who knows what they're going to be facing. And we don't want any of our pastors or leaders, and especially our volunteers, because many of our Next Gen workers are volunteers in our churches out here. We don't want them to feel alone. We don't want them to not know where to turn. And so I don't have all the answers. Absolutely. It's absolutely not. But I do know Jesus, and he does know all the answers. And I can encourage you. I can pray with you. I can ask you questions about your ministry to help you suss out where the Lord is leading you. And so that is I see as a big part of my job, is just being available to these people who are on the front lines. And then on the other side of it, being a voice and a champion, bringing concerns or ideas to the district office or to Dexcom, and representing the next generation of people and the next generation of workers, because church is going to change. And I'm even here now to talk about that. Like, how have things changed and where is it going? I don't know, but I'm happy to figure it out with everyone. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity that I have to be in this role.
So then, in light of those maybe coming changes, talk to us about some of the values of that you've seen in Gen Z, and the message that sends to the church in terms of how to reach them and involve them in the church again.
Absolutely. When I think about Gen Z, Gen Alpha, it's kind of this strange dichotomy, because they can they really value authenticity, and so they can spot baloney from a mile away. But we also see people putting up incredibly elaborate facades on social media too. But you can even just imagine that they've grown up in a world full of Photoshop and online trolls and now AI. They've had to learn how to spot authenticity versus not being people who aren't being genuine. And that's huge for them. Like, when you're authentic and real, they can sense that and from the moment. I think some other values that they have are they value action. They want to see things happening. They want to see change. They want to see things be different. They're bold. You might call it stupid, but they're willing to just do something, whether it's rightly guided or not. They do value community. They want community. They want that relationship, even if it's the smallest, tiniest little chunk of community online with this very specific, weird TV show that they found or whatever it is. But they find their group, they find their people, and they are connected to them. And I would say they're very thoughtful. They are not afraid to think through these things and ask these questions. It's just where they get in their information from is the more of the bigger concern, and they're getting their information from TikTok and Reddit and who knows where. So, I mean, all of these are in my mind strengths to these students, but any strength overdone is a weakness, and that development, their baloney radar might be overdeveloped, and then they start to dismiss anything that comes to them, or they take action without weighing the risk or those things. And so as I think about this, what's that message for us as leaders is like, well, we can learn from them. We can learn from young people and what they're doing and what they want to see changing in the world. But I get the change is happening, and it's happening incredibly fast in our world right now, and that can be scary. But Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they want to see change, and they want to know what's next. And so the message for us, I think we need to be authentic and genuine and start to invite them in to because Jesus is about changing the world too. And so invite them in to change the world in the name of Jesus, and not to be afraid of their ideas, but let them sort things out. I mean, we were all stupid kids at one point. There just happened to be.
Speak for yourself.
Terry never was a kid.
They just happen to be kids right now in this incredibly different world that has access to everything, and their world can be their opinions and ideas can be shared with the world. Man, I'm glad that my ideas were not shared with the world when I was a 12-year-old. And so it's a whole different ball game of how they interact with everything, with adults and with the world and with their friends. And so it's just very different. And so what's the message is don't be afraid of it. Start to figure it out. It takes steps to engage them where they're at.
All right, I just want to follow up on that a little bit.
Yeah.
It feels like there's so much access to information, and everything is always right in front of them. And we've also heard about the increase in anxiety. Do you see a connection between those two? And what's that look like in the younger generations?
I absolutely would see a connection between those. I mean, growing up, I never watched the news. I didn't have any access to the news, but every day these kids are getting extremist messages from kids their own age. So it's more engaging for them. Mm-hmm. And now they think this is the most important thing in the world. And everything is so heightened as a student, as a teen, because it's the first time you're experiencing all of these things. The first breakup, the first failed test, it feels like the end of the world. And now these kids are facing things that might actually be the end of the world, like war and climate change and all of these things that it's becomes really important, and they don't know how to regulate those emotions, and they don't know what to do with those emotions, and they don't have people in their lives that are actually there in person to help them sort out those feelings, which is part of the reason I love emotionally healthy spirituality, because man, that is such a problem that all of us have, is working through those emotions and being able to grieve, being able to process fear and anxiety. And our students don't know what to do with all of these worries, because all they're being told what to do is worry, 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 worry. Yeah. They aren't given the hope of the future. They aren't given something to look forward to. And that's personally why I think they want so much change. They don't see a hope in the future without change. And so they're driven to make change happen regardless of consequence. You can see all of these values kind of intertwining now as like, well, we need to do all of these things or else we're dead. Like that's the consequence feels like the consequence of everything for them is like, if this doesn't change, we're all going to die, which obviously is a very junior high response to things. It's just the absolute extreme.
So, Michael, it seems like every new generation is maligned and criticized by those who have gone before them. So tell us some things that should encourage us about this up and coming generation.
their greatest strength is the greatest encouragement to me, that they want to see change in the world, that they want something to be different, because I can easily connect them to Jesus who wants to change the world. And I think that is that biggest fear, because man, change is coming at us so fast. The world is changing so fast. And it's kind of even interesting as far as generations are concerned. It used to be like this 20-year process of like, this is when like really a generation shifts and change. But from millennials to Gen Alpha, there's like 3 or 4 different cycles of generation really in there, between a late stage millennial and a early stage millennial to a Gen Z to a Gen Alpha, just because of the advancement of technology in the past 30 years. And there's so much of that change that's happening than ever. And it's scary to try to keep up with that change. And I think that's part of where that criticism comes from for young people, is like, you guys need to slow down. But they don't see, again, that hope without the change and pushing it forward. I mean, what should encourage us is that they want this change. Yep. And if we can figure out how to partner with them and bring Jesus into the things that they care about and the things that they want to see changed, that is a huge encouragement. And if we can set this generation on fire for Jesus, they're going to do amazing things. I mean, there's so many there's so many spaces that we can connect with them. I think, they value caring for homeless. They know people need food and shelter. Let's partner with them. Let's bring them into ministries that care for that, and show them that this is Jesus's heart too. We go crazy. What's so wrong with cleaning up the ocean? Like, these kids are so activist in these things. Let's plant a forest in Jesus's name. But the future of church is in their hands, and the future of church is going to be different and unique. And I'm excited for that, but it's going to be harder for them to do that if we don't partner with them now and invite them into this process and mission for Jesus now. Yep. So let's invite them into those spaces and value their opinion. I also work part-time at our local church as a youth pastor, and we have a girl on staff who's maybe 20, maybe 21, but she's just on fire for Jesus. And I love seeing her. She takes organizes our littles at church, and but she just has a passion for Jesus. And I don't know how she has invited more people to church than anyone I've known, because she's just out there. She just has this heart for Jesus. She senses people's hurting and just says, come join me, come hang out with me, come to Wednesday night, come to Sunday morning. Let me pray for you. She's just so on fire. And she's just this young person that exemplifies, like, if we can really get that spark going, it'll make a huge difference, because that's their heart, that's their desire, and that should be encouraging to us. It can be scary because they're changing things that we don't know about yet, but if we can harness it, man, I'm excited to see what they'll do.
Yeah.
So my experience has been that a lot of the younger generation, I find them more appreciative of older generations than, say, my generation was appreciative of older generations. Have I just happened to run into some really nice young generation people, or do you think that's more of a trademark of this generation?
I think in a sense it is, they're coming back around to understand the value of older people, but the people that I have found that they will choose to listen to and invest in are people who are willing to listen to them. So Alan, you are a learner, and I think you're happy to learn from a young person. And it comes back to me to that authenticity. Like, you're being authentic with them. You're treating them as a human being and saying you have value, and they reciprocate that. And so that's what I've seen with young people. It's when the older people come and say, well, you don't know what you're doing, and then just dismiss them entirely, that's when there's like that rebellion or that response to not listen and to work against those things. And so that's why I want to encourage our churches, like, invite these young people into these spaces. That's part of the reason Gina brought me to the district office, is she wanted younger faces. And I'm not like even that young at 34, but
well, that seems pretty young to me. I don't know.
It is young compared to you, Terry.
and compared probably to a lot of our district offices, I'm really blessed to be in that position. But she wants to hear from that younger generation, and younger people, when they feel heard, will respond and will listen. And it's all comes back to that relational aspect. And so if you're treating them as a human, as an equal to an extent, if you're willing to have those conversations with them, I mean, that's their desire, is to be seen and respected and heard.
So somewhere in there, Michael, you supported Alan's theory that he's still hip. So if you could stop that, I'd appreciate it.
That is not. I'm not sure if I've ever been hip, Terry. So you don't have to worry about that.
Well, I'm sure you haven't been either, but
so
I think
that's great.
I think I just called him an old person who's willing to learn.
Right.
So
yeah,
I did
he
hear you
actually
call him an
did.
old person
So I don't
too.
really feel like there was any kind of affirmation of being hip. Except maybe if my hip is causing me problems, that's about it. So
you need hip replacement, Alan.
Not yet. But anyhow, hey, speaking of, I do remember when I was a youth pastor, there was a lot of energy needed because we wanted to be creative and we wanted to have fun too.
Yeah,
and I think there still is a connection point in that. Like, how do you work together the idea that creativity and that fun, and then engage students with the word in today's generation?
Yeah. I here's the other thing I have found and felt about this generation, is that those students who choose to be in church and a part of Jesus are in it. There's not as many wishy-washy, I'm here because of my dad kind of things. Like, if they want to be there, they'll be there. And growing up in Nebraska, like, if it was Wednesday, I was at church, and whether I wanted to or not. And there was a lot of students there like that. And I know this is also partly California, because we don't have that culture. Like, our schools don't stop activities on Wednesday nights that kids can go to youth group like I had when I grew up in high school. That's just not California. And so the students who choose to be there are invested and choose to be there. And the students nowadays, again, in general, are very well informed, and they care about a lot of things. So it's almost more important to help them have fun, because developmentally they need to be having fun. They need to be enjoying life and having those pieces. And so for me, finding a balance between those serious moments and the fun comes. I'm great at being serious. I'm not actually always the best at having fun, but kids can naturally have fun. So I let them have fun in a sense. I try to provide space or a setting, or maybe, sometimes it is a structured game or whatever, just to have fun, to build those relationships and take their mind off of those things of school and with other things. But in life, in family, there's so much more. I want them to have fun at church. They remember church is a space that I can be myself, that I can just let loose. And so the balance has often for me come from releasing them to have fun and then drawing them back in to have that conversation. And I know that's part of it's just my heart. Like, I want them to know the truth. I want to be able to speak these things to them, but I also know, like, they have to see authenticity in me, and so I'm going to have to play spoons with them, or I'm going to have to, play hide and go seek with them, because that's an authentic reaction to being a genuine person and relating with them. And so that balance is important, and it can be hard to find, but if you just trust kids for a little bit, and I know that's a really scary statement for some people, to trust a student. That's insane. But I try to trust a student until they give me a reason not to trust them. And then that just starts to allow the relationship to flow, and we can have fun, but then they can also receive whatever I want to say into their lives. And maybe that's a point of correction. Maybe that's an opportunity to pray for them. Even just in these past few weeks at my local church, after the lesson, I've had the opportunity just to speak one-on-one with a student who just came back from 13 months at like a student rehab facility, basically. And he had been coming to our church. He'd come back to our church in December, come into youth group for a few months, and he finally just like opens up because it felt like a safe place, and just allowing him to be himself. And he was the kid that sat in the back with the headphones in his ears during the lesson, but I trusted him and trusted that Jesus was going to speak to him. And it came to a point when he opened up on his own. And so it's hard to trust people and let them go on their journey and trust that Jesus is working in their lives. But that's kind of the balance that I try to find. Try to find of letting them be themselves, but also speaking truth, however they're going to receive it. They're often listening more than we imagine.
So in today's world, the church is faced with challenging issues dealing with sexuality and gender. Mm-hmm. So, Michael, how do we cling to the unchanging truth of God's word while welcoming those who may be living in opposition to that truth so that we have an opportunity to communicate the gospel of Jesus Christ to them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge question. I'm sure many people are asking themselves and wrestling with right now. And it is the hot button topic right now. But I mean, there's so many things our students are dealing with that are visible and invisible to us. And those might express themselves with actions and fashion changes and things like that. But we've already talked about the anxiety that students are wrestling with, the depression, the suicide rates, that can be scary in some senses, what our students are dealing with. And the answer to the question for me is in the question, is clinging to Jesus and inviting people to experience Jesus. An encounter with Jesus can transform someone's life in a moment. And if it doesn't, they at least have that moment to look back to, and God can use at some point in life. I'll sometimes call the youth ministry the long con, where like I get to put all these pieces in place, and someday the little Rube Goldberg machine is going to tip over and it's all going to click for them. But I might not get to see that play out. But if they experience Jesus in one way, shape, or form, then they'll always have that. It's not my job to transform their life or convict them of sin. That's Jesus's job. My job is to love them, to speak truth to them, and make sure that they get to know Jesus. And that's my goal above all else. So many people are searching for belonging, and that should be the church. And, back 70 years ago, the most important piece for someone changing how they believe was facts, and facts were the engine of the train of thoughts, so to speak. And then there was feelings and experience, but now it's all flipped, and it's the experience that leads the way, and then there's feelings, and then there's facts at the back. They're the caboose, but they don't really matter. So students nowadays will try on Christianity. They'll come to winter camp and try on, is this something that can fits me? Do I feel welcome? Do I feel a part of this? Marco Stryker shared, he speaks at lots of places, and he shared this story with me that he would often pray for students during worship, and they'd see them. And sometimes he'd see this kid like the front row and doing the mosh pit and raising hands and super going crazy. And that same kid would come up to him after speaking and say, "Hey, I still have some questions about Jesus." And Marco would be like, "Weren't you like leading the charge on this Christian mosh pit in there?" Like, "Yeah, but I was just trying that on. I just wanted to see if I liked it." Yeah. And I did. So I have more questions. Yeah. And so students nowadays are just like trying on, does Christianity fit me? Am I accepted? Am I welcomed? Can I see myself here in the future? And then they'll figure out the facts later. And sometimes we might think, "Wow, that's really flaky. That's like that's unauthentic." But that's just growing up. That's just students figuring themselves out about who they want to be. And so we have students who are trying on different sexualities or genders or things, or finding their space to belong. And it all comes back to that belonging. Are they welcomed? And it's certainly a fine line to walk between welcoming someone into your community and affirming them. And it's a hard line to follow, but the gospel is for everyone, and everyone should be welcomed and loved. And if we're going to see change in their life, they need to know there's a community that's going to support them. And that's a huge thing for me. And I hope that every student who comes through my ministry feels loved and welcomed and experiences Jesus.
Amen. Good word.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we want to see here, there's the call for change in leadership. And so I guess I kind of want to put two questions together, if I can, to kind of wrap it up. One would be, what do youth pastors, volunteers, leaders, what changes would you suggest to them so that they can raise up future leaders, whether it's ministry leaders or more volunteer leaders that are going to invest in the next generation?
Yeah. Be intentional. Be intentional with your actions. Like, don't just go through the motions. Don't just go through a program to go through a program. Be intentional about discipleship and raising people up and inviting people into ministry and casting that vision of saying, like, I see something in you. This student who came to me and shared like his experience of going through, rehab and 13 months away from his family. He's coming back. He came to winter camp and is like back on fire for Jesus. And one of the first things I said to him is like, the Lord has something for you, for your future. And the Lord is going to use this story, this moment for a purpose. Invite students into that and into experiencing that. And I asked him, would you like to share your story on Sunday morning? And getting students to start to vocalize their own experiences and their own faith is so important to crystallizing it in their hearts and in their minds. So be intentional about your actions, be intentional about your ministry. Go to them, meet them where they are. Gary Wozniak would always say it's time on their turf. And, it's going to their recitals and being involved in their life that displays authenticity, that shows love, and they want to be loved. They want to be a part of that relationship. So, and then this, and cast the vision of what that future can be. And then the other thing that I had to learn in ministry is releasing the outcome of saying, like, Lord, whatever you actually want to do here, do it. And that is so hard. When you plan an event, you spend resources and time to set things up, and maybe not as many kids show up as you wanted. But those kids that are there are the ones that Jesus brought to you. And so Jesus is trusting you with those students in that moment. And I'm sure there might be youth workers or leaders listening to this saying, yep, I had that last week when only 2 kids showed up. But what did you do for those 2 kids? Because that's the ministry that God gave you for that night. And that's not the outcome that you wanted, but Jesus is going to do something even greater than what you wanted or what you had planned. And so holding loosely, being intentional, having desires and hopes. And I always think about the verses in Proverbs. A man may plan his steps, plan his path, but the Lord determines his steps. And that's part of what we're doing in ministry is like, we have this goal, this path, this place for you to go. And I'm going to walk with you towards this place. But it's really up to them and to Jesus as well. And so holding open hands and letting God do the rest is a key there to even having longevity. Because if you face disappointment after disappointment because your expectations aren't met every time, then you're gonna get burned. But when we trust that Jesus is still working, regardless of success defined by ourselves, then it's easier to continue moving forward and know. I've been blessed to see students that came through my ministry that are now serving in churches as youth pastors and leaders, and that's a beautiful thing. And not every student is going to take that path. The predecessor to my role used to talk about, you don't always get to see the fruit in ministry, but sometimes you'll get a fruit snack. It like tastes like a strawberry and kind of looks like a strawberry. And you kind of have to savor those little fruit snacks every now and then. When a student responds, when a student steps up, when a student is kind to the new kid, there's little ways to appreciate what's happening in ministry and look for the good in those students and look for the good that they're bringing to the world. And it can be hard when there's so many bad examples of the next generation, but there are so many great, fantastic kids and students out there.
Great. Yeah, Michael, thank you for your investment in the next generation.
Yeah.
And thanks for talking with us today. We're grateful for it. And I'm sure it's been helpful to Alliance leaders listening around the country and around the world. So thanks much.
You bet.
Alan, some really insightful stuff about ministry to the next generation. What nugget are you walking away with and holding on to?
Well, I appreciate that some things haven't changed. I mean, students do really still long for connection. He talked about that, and the world is offering them to something that is a very shallow and surface connection online. And so the church really does have an advantage, because in Jesus, we have an opportunity to offer real connection that can not only connect them to other people, but also connect them with the God who loves them. But we have to be honest about the challenges of this culture and to be intentional in calling them into the way of Jesus, clinging to Jesus. I appreciated that phrase from Michael. We need to do more of that in all areas of ministry, and it certainly is the case here. I think perhaps we throw ourselves at Jesus and say, Jesus, we want to see your goodness multiplied among the next generation, and we would be flexible and making sure we understand that he's going to make his outcomes happen, not just what we want to have, but what he wants to happen. So yeah, I appreciated all that.
Yep. Good word. So next time, season 11, episode 10 will be our biographical interview. We'll be talking to Paul Yang, a Hmong district pastor up in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota. Looking forward to that conversation. So join us then. Invite your friends to join us. Invite everyone to join us. And,
that's right.
Let them benefit from EquippingU podcast. Meanwhile, keep the faith.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the EquippingU podcast. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. For more information about this podcast and other ministries of the Alliance, visit EquippingU.org.